and thank you for listening in to CLDF Chatter. To give you a quick overview, CLDF is a national charity which supports families whose child has a childhood liver disease, and as part of the charity we have a young people's service which provides support to 11 to 24-year-olds living with a liver condition. The Young People's Service has an online group called Hive and Hive Plus on Facebook, which enables members to connect online and share experiences. I am the Young People's Digital Engagement Officer at CLDF. Today we would like to give a warm welcome to Catherine, who is 25 and previously been supported by the charity and has now moved to adult services. Catherine has been involved with the Young People's Service and now supports the charity by helping others with sharing her experiences for our members to listen to. So Catherine, it's lovely to have you back again. Do you want to let everybody know a little bit about yourself so they can get to know you a bit?
Yeah, it's obviously you too, Louise. It's been a little while, not too long, but I've just turned 25 and it's been an interesting transition. I've obviously been seen by Exeter Hospital and Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham for a while, so it's good to talk about adult services. I was born with biliotresia and had a Kasai procedure at 4.5 weeks old. And then when I was 7 months old, I had my liver transplanted, which was a really kind of easy process. After that, I went to school and had a regular, normal life. And then I had de novo autoimmune hepatitis diagnosis at 14. And that's when I became involved with CLDF through Talk, Tell, Transform.
Yeah, and your story from Talk, Tell, Transform is also on YouTube, isn't it? So people can have a little look at your story prior to you now being an independent young adult. So
I look exactly the same as I did when I was that age, which makes me laugh like 10 years later.
Well, that's a good thing. Yes. Obviously, you have recently, well, actually, you've been with adult services now quite a little while, haven't you? Because when did you transition?
I was 18 in Birmingham, and then my local hospital in Exeter I was 16. So two different, so almost 10 years in Exeter, and then just the 8 in Birmingham, Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah. And we're following up with you today because we have recently found out that you had a recent biopsy in adult services. So it'd be really interesting for you to share how that went, what you were thinking prior to the biopsy. And then from your experience, it might be nice for you to share some advice to our listeners who maybe feel a little bit nervous by it or just don't know what to expect. And obviously from your experience, it'd be great for you to share that. So I was going to ask you then, Catherine, how has adult services been for you?
The initial transition day, which I remember really, really well, with Birmingham Queen Elizabeth, it was really informative and supportive. It was really helpful because you go from this stage as a child where, everything's kind of done for you and your parents and, medical professionals are making the decisions from when your appointments are, what you're having done. And you don't really think far beyond that. Your parents do your medication and everything else. So when you're suddenly told you're officially an adult in medical sense and you've got to move to a different hospital. I remember it being a really emotional process. It was really odd because I feel like most children never have an emotional connection to a hospital. It's a really weird feeling. I think most people at CLDF would definitely relate to that. It's like a family, and even though some people see them a variety amount of times, regularly or very irregularly, they have saved your life, and that's a massive part. I was there from 4.5 weeks old until 18 in Birmingham's case, and so apart from a month of my life, they were literally saving my life, which is crazy. Yeah, it was emotional because you have that connection to that hospital that you now have to rebuild somewhere else. And so that first day was really, really important, that you don't feel like you're suddenly an adult and everything you have to figure out yourself, and where do you go and who do you speak to. From 18 till 25 is adolescence, and I think that's a really helpful time. I would really encourage the hospital to take that away, because you don't suddenly turn into an adult when you're 18. It takes a long time, and so those 7 years-ish is a massive help to kind of slowly guide you into now, as I am a complete adult. I say that I'm a complete adult at 25. I've learned the steps and who I speak to and what I do and don't need to do as an adult. So that was really good. And also I have Exeter as a local hospital where I did completely go to adults ward at 16. But they are a very supportive hospital anyway for that adults centre. It's a smaller hospital than Birmingham, obviously less specialist cases and so less demand. And I've had the same doctor there and lovely, lovely nurses for the whole time. And so that wasn't frightening because it's a very small unit and like Birmingham, you have a Wednesday for Birmingham clinic, for adolescents anyway, and then a Tuesday for my Exeter one. And so I was used to that routine.
I was going to say, it's quite a challenging time when you do move hospital, especially like you say, when you've got such a good relationship with your childhood hospital. And I completely got it when you said, oh, actually, not many children feel very connected to a hospital, but in most liver young people's cases where, like you say, they've either received a transplant or they're going for regular checkup. Some say it could be a second home because you spent that much time there, or others it's a familiar place where you feel comfortable with, and it's finding that balance with your next hospital, isn't it? So, but yeah, I mean, the adolescent service for when you transition to adult services, each hospital's different, but your experience with Queen Elizabeth was very positive by the sounds of it. And I mean, CLDF as well, we work with the staff very closely there, and it seems that they are very supportive, that they understand that it's a big change, very welcoming. I mean, did you get a presentation, Catherine, at all when you started?
And that was a really good support. They take you into separate rooms. You even have time to eat together with a couple of other families also transitioning to the adults ward. And yeah, it was amazing presentation, reinforcing, like, particularly if you're going to university or if you're not, and if you're traveling, kind of what you need to do there and who you speak to and what's different and what isn't different. It was quite a forceful situation in some ways, because we were told, like, you must be sensible in this respect and this is changing now, but it was important because I think some people can be really lulled along with, like, I don't need to take responsibility for it, or my mum always does it, or you get the opposite side where people really want to know all that information and take care of themselves. So
yeah, there was always a phrase when I attended the transition session, and that was parents could be supervisors, but not managers of the health condition as you turn into adult services, which I thought was a very good way to put it, because it almost meant that parents could take a step back but still have a level of control to oversee that you were taking on your medication okay, and you were managing your appointments and communicating with the hospital. Like, it's that, like you said, that settling period, isn't it, to get you to that point where you can be independent and remember to do it all. I think that's a really good way to explain to parents and young people, actually, your parents are there still to support you and the staff around you are there to support you, but it's about encouraging you to take it on yourself and make those small baby steps to doing it. So
it's so true. I think it's, like, hopefully a really healing process for parents as well, as long as emotional day too. But they do realize, that it's okay now, because people have kind of thought about the fact that you're an adult and that's okay to hold on and, like, also let go of the reins a little bit, to learn that your child has got through the childhood liver side and now they're a young person. And obviously that's, of course, emotional. I can't relate to that because I'm not a parent. I can imagine that's quite a lot too, but it must be quite nice to know that together a team has made that decision, that your child is now old enough to take on that responsibility. I think my mum was really grateful for the fact that, I had someone to text or call or to email my concerns, especially as you're, like, a growing person. If you have more concerns, and there might be someone that you want to speak to that isn't a parent, it's so important that. And I was really grateful for that kind of holistic approach. And obviously there was difficulties with COVID pandemic, and you'd be completely ignorant to ignore, NHS funding and staffing, which is, it's just insane what they're going through. And I haven't transitioned recently to the adults ward, so I don't know if that's different now, but yeah, it's really important to have those connections, especially, like, I lived in Bath and Exeter, so I've never lived in Birmingham in my life. It's been really important to have that connection still.
Like you say, it is an emotional time for parents, because it's that milestone of, oh, my child is growing up. And like with any parent, that is a big step anyway, that your child is becoming a little bit more independent, not needing that supervision as much. And it's almost like when you say goodbye to your child when they're going off to university. It's almost like that emotional roller coaster that a parent goes through. So I think there's been many parents that have also shedded a tear in these transition sessions, but it's quite overwhelming, because I think you've had such a journey with your child that sometimes your child never knew. Like, obviously when you were a baby, your parents went through a roller coaster of emotions and choices, and they'll always remember that when probably you transitioned and thought, look where we are today. And it's also a cry of happiness to celebrate where you've got
a bit of relief. Their child has been lucky enough to survive the whole time, because people don't always have that luxury of going through liver diseases and surviving, and it would be really ignorant to say that everybody does, sadly. And so I think there must be quite a lot of mixed emotions. Probably can't imagine what my parents
Definitely, yeah. And I think that's why it really helps when you've got such a warm welcome to a new hospital,
Yeah,
and the staff are
definitely.
really understanding, and you get that positive vibe that you're like, actually, yeah, this is just like the way I was treated in my previous hospital. I'm comfortable
Yeah.
here. And that's why I think it'd be really good to find out kind of what your experience has been like in terms of the procedures that you've had within the hospital. Let's just explore then. So you've spoken about the fact that you have transitioned. You've gone through that process from the ages of like 16 and 18 into hospital. So that again is a balance, isn't it? And you could probably
Yeah.
compare the two as well.
Yeah.
But what was it like to get used to that new hospital? Was it quite quick for you, or was there elements that it took a bit of time?
So to start with, it was a really easy and gradual process. I didn't know that I was transitioning into a new hospital straight away, but that was mostly because of timing of my medical treatment. It was a bit of a question as to when that was going to happen. And it depended on my last child biopsy results. So that wasn't a fault of anybody else. It was very much based on what my organ was doing. So it was a bit, they'd wanted to continue their plan of treatment up to the very last minute, as a child that they could. And if I was healthy enough, then they were happy for that new treatment and new doctor's mindset and person to look at the situation in adults. And I was lucky when I was 16, I did get more positive results than we'd imagined. And so I was able to transition suddenly quite quickly. But the actual gradual process, it was really relaxing, and it was actually a fun day out. I remember it being quite fun. I mean, the people that I met in the staff, very funny people, they're quite like, they've done this all their life. And I think it obviously massively depends on who's treating you. Always does, doesn't it, that you connect with them. And I definitely remember names, I'll always remember names of staff and who I really connect with, because that's really important, like somebody who understands the whole part of who you are. So that side was really easy.
So did they start discussing that with you in the children's hospital, and then was it followed up by a letter that you received in the post to invite you to the new hospital?
I remember rightly, I think it was. I think the letter itself that was kind of given to me at an appointment, because I was just there very close to moving over to the transition unit. So I remember being spoken to about it, but it was very much maybe not, just because of the situation. And doctor at the time, he said to me, you probably will go there if your results are really good. But honestly, I don't think any of us expected how good my results were, which is such a lovely place to be. And so I transitioned very quickly at my next appointment. He kind of gave me a letter and said, you might have 1 or 2 more appointments here, but then you're going to be going over to Queen Elizabeth's. And CLDF played a massive part in that, because I knew about CLDF from when I was, 14, when I got re-diagnosed. Of course, they were around a lot more before that, but I kind of grew up with my transplant being a bit as a side matter, apart from a medication every day. And, I would go to the transplant games in the summer. I very much was like, oh, I've had a transplant, and I celebrate that in the summer when I go to the games. It was like that kind of mindset, and I was very lucky with that. And, obviously I had blood tests and biopsies and checkups, but it was very like, oh, that just happens once a month, and that just happens every 2 years or 5 years. And when I went to the adults ward, it was CLDF. It was a long time ago, and I was about 5 years. That's good. And he had to show me where to go to Queen Elizabeth's. He met me at the station, and I think a lot of people went through this process who were transitioning to the adults clinic, and they would like kind of be there in case you got lost, but leave you to it. And the whole idea was that you were taking them to your hospital, and they would show you where to go. It was interesting. So funny. I nearly ended up in Cadbury World, which would have been really nice, which is a stop after Queen Elizabeth. But we ended up, like, obviously it's a uni campus as well, so you have to make sure I wouldn't have found it without him being there. So that was really helpful. Yeah, and I actually, so I met you. I remember meeting you very well, actually. I was
The clinic,
well, because I really didn't want to be at the hospital again. And you were the person who cheers me up, and I was like, so grumpy. And so I really got along with you. I remember it really well. Yeah, so CLDF was like a massive part of that transition phase, because they suddenly became a massive emotional support when it was about that age that I really was aware of what my liver was doing and how it would impact my life.
Yeah, like all the wider things that you're like, actually, I didn't think about that. And yeah, that's something that we've discussed with other young people. I'll do a phone call with somebody and I'll be like, oh, we are here to support you when you're ready, and when you might want to discuss things that are relevant in the future, such as work and declaring that health. And I mean, for some young people, they know that a transplant might have to happen in adulthood instead. And it's having that conversation with them and going, actually, when that time comes, when you are a young adult, then we're here to discuss like coming out of work for a long period of time and on sick and all that. And they're like, oh yeah, I never thought about any of that. And you're like, well, you naturally probably wouldn't, but one of them that when it does come along, we are here to discuss that. So it's nice for you to mention that. Obviously, we didn't expect that. So a nice little shout out there for the charity from Catherine.
I probably go on for ages how many times I've bounced ideas off of you, and I think you just go through like a different period of enlightenment. Every child does, and it'll impact you depending on what your life stage is at, whether you choose to go to uni, whether you choose to work, whether you different times and different questions will come up. So it's really important to talk to you guys. It really is, because you already know people have gone through it. It's like you're not really on your own. You probably
And that's it as well, isn't it? You connect yourself then to a community of people that already you get to meet people, which I know you on your journey, especially you've met, well, they're now young adults that you still stay in touch with, don't you?
Yeah, I do. A friend that lives here, I've moved really close to her now, and we're going to meet up this week, and I haven't seen her in like 5 years, and I met her through CLDF. So it's like so bizarre, like you almost have like a web link of everyone across the UK, which is really handy if you go traveling around.
No, it is really handy, and you've always got those people to bounce questions off, haven't you? Or have you gone through this? What did what did you do? Just so you don't feel like you're the only one in the world as well. So, Catherine, it's really positive that you've met some other young people that you can chat with and ask advice. I think one of the biggest advice that would be really beneficial for listeners to hear is, how do you manage your condition independently as a young adult? Because I can imagine there's lots of things that you need to be responsible for and learn how to take control of. So have you got any advice for our listeners?
So I always say that a lot of it comes down to doing things gradually and not just suddenly taking control of loads of things. It's just not a healthy way to do it, is to like suddenly try and take on everything. And I just don't think that's sensible. And I don't think, like, when you're a parent, for example, when you have a kid, you don't like suddenly know everything the moment they're born. You just learn as you go, different ages, different stages and things like that. So I would say a lot of it starts with parents. If you've been diagnosed really young, obviously this would be a slightly different because you've grown up and learnt with these processes like me. But also if you're diagnosed as a teenager, you'll slowly take control of things as you're learning it, which is slightly different. But for me, I would say that these apply, generally these kind of ideas I came up with would apply for everybody. So I would say for parents, like age appropriate information. I think it's really important not to be like, oh, they have a condition and over worry about it, constantly part of their life. Make sure you always have time out, activities that aren't related to hospital, but equally don't shy away from it. Like, don't be like fearful of the fact that your child has a condition, because it's already scary. You don't need to make them worry or make yourself worry unnecessarily. I would just say, I find some people don't find this helpful, so work out what type of personality you are, but I really enjoy the sciencey side of it and asking questions. I find that I feel less emotional, less concerned, and less like annoyed with my body. It sounds weird to say that, but you can get annoyed with your body when you know it's a lot more scientific. It's not like one day you woke up and thought, I'm going to have a liver disorder. It was a lot more complicated than that. And I also think sometimes parents have this like guilt feeling. I don't know if my parents did, I've never asked them, but like, their child's got a liver condition, did they give it to them? And it's like, well, you also gave them their hair color, your eye color, you know what I mean? You give them everything. So it's like, you just don't know. But it could be anything. We don't know the link of what dementia is. We don't know what the link of heart disease is or blood disease, but we're human and we're always going to have these things. And so being open to the fact that you have a condition and you need to manage it shouldn't be a frightening thing. I think it's so bizarre that people find that like a concerning matter. I'm really like, it didn't get me wrong, my liver disease, a real pain sometimes, like managing the treatment. And it's accepting the fact that, it is tough and like it is something. And as a child, my parents were brilliant in phrasing it in a very positive way. Like, you might have to take these tablets, and you go to these appointments, but you get to go to the transplant games. You get to be with someone and learn things that like someone else is not going to learn. You're going to find other things really important in your life. You're going to know the value of health. That type of stuff is a really important thing to instill in your child, like as much as you can, obviously, because sometimes immunosuppression changes this. But like, go out, go to the park, go and do things. Just because even if you have to do it differently, like you can't eat certain things or you can't climb that climbing frame because you just had surgery, doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. You know, like I think it's a really like interesting perspective that people think just because you have a condition, you can't enjoy certain things. Well, it's all dependent on the person you are anyway. You know, you might not enjoy reading a book, someone else might. You know, it's like, so I think that's my first thing, is just don't be fearful of what life is. Unfortunately, life is awful sometimes and it does happen, and that's not to underestimate the emotions. And then like the practical side of it, I found attending sleepovers, managing my own medication was really a core to my understanding of my organ and my transplant and my liver conditions. As a child, I only really took cyclosporin after my transplant. So by the time I'd recovered from that, probably I think I was about 2 when I was completely on just on cyclosporin. And that was until I was 14. So for those 12 years, I really only took medication at morning and night. And I just knew that I took medication. I didn't really pay attention to the fact that my brother didn't take medication. It wasn't a massive thing. I knew that it tasted disgusting because it was in a liquid form. And I used to be, do I have to have that again? And try and like see if I can get away with not taking it by running upstairs, because I didn't think about what it was. I just thought, oh, I have to have medication like you do with a headache. You know, I really didn't think about it under that age. And then the classic for most people is realizing that you have a scar, because when you grow up with it, you know, kids don't really analyze their own body till a lot later on in life. Normally it's a changing room situation where you're changed with other people and you're like, oh wait there, I have a scar and you don't have a scar. And from that point, you don't really notice that anything different in you. Like you don't walk around saying, oh, you have brown hair and I have blonde hair or something. It's like, it's just not, you just don't think like that. Kids don't really think that about characteristics. They think,
and it's a bit about the experience that someone goes through then, because like you say, if you're starting to get to that age where you're like, oh, you don't have a scar but I do, it's what response you get from another child with that also makes a massive impact, doesn't it? Because at the end of the day, if you've got some real positive friends at school that are like, oh, you know, that's pretty cool, then that's a really positive way to look at it. But there are many young people out there also that do get bullied because they're slightly different, and it does happen. But that's when I think that if you find other people that have also got a liver condition and know exactly what it's like, they give you a real boost, because they're the ones that completely understand, don't they? You've covered quite a bit there in terms of all the elements that you go through, and you know, from an early age up until now, of managing condition, even sleepovers, like you say, and managing medication. It's all stuff you've got to kind of think about.
It's about being empowered. Like when you're young, I think it is very like face value, isn't it? Like children can be mean, you know, they can just say things that aren't so fair and nice. And it's about instilling in your child that, yeah, you do have a scar, but you have an amazing story behind that. So when people do point out that stuff, you can be like, but it saved my life. I have someone else's organ, or if it's Kasai, I had this procedure or biopsy because of X, Y, and Z. And most children, if it's how you phrase it to them, if they're interested, like some kids can be really interested in that stuff. Like you're suddenly really cool, you know?
Yeah.
It's a really, it obviously it depends on who your friends are. So it does depend. But with the tablet side of it, I always think making it like less of a chore is becoming like maybe educated in what they are. For example, that one's an immunosuppressant, this one's a steroid, that one's a vitamin, and doing it yourself, like slowly. Like, so I ended up on tablets when I was 14, and I had suddenly I only had 3, but it seemed like a big jump suddenly from 1 to 3, because I suddenly had to realize how to swallow tablets as well, which was I really struggled with that for a week. And now it's so funny because I can swallow like 4 or 5 at a time. It seems crazy to me that it was hard, but you know, setting up your own tablet boxes with your parents, and then being in charge of taking your own tablets, and you know, having a communal place everyone can see whether you've taken them or not, so other people can remind you if you've forgotten. Actually, my first tablet box came from CLDF. It was a residential Talk Cloud Transform. Prior to that, I'd literally been on tablets for like maybe a month before, and I was just taking them out of boxes because they were like slightly changing all the time. Yeah, the first tablet box I had was from your team, and I asked for another one as well. It's because I ended up on more tablets, and it was really helpful that. And I went away to Talk Cloud Transform at the same time, so I was lucky to kind of learn about other people's stories more in depth, because you literally are with them on a residential for the week, so you really do learn everything. And then my parents just slowly let me do my own tablets and etc. Went to uni and did that. I used to do things that made it fun as well. Like, I have always found awareness a really helpful way for me to express my own emotions and feel like I'm making a positive thing out of a situation that could be really negative. I mean, you've seen me in really hard times where I feel like I'm on a break. So it's not always sunshine and daisies, but if you can like come back from that in the moments that are okay and do something good with it, it's really helpful. And I like to write stuff, do these, obviously I love talking, and but I log my process that I since 14 of going through this. I take pictures of my medication boxes. I make things fun, because otherwise it's just like, it can be really depressing. It's really important to be like, this is my journey, and like I update my social media about that. I think a lot of people get inspired by seeing what other people go through.
And you have all that for memories, don't you? So everything you
Yeah.
document, you look back and you're like, oh, I remember that time, and that time I was feeling so happy. It could be a really positive moment. I mean, even if you document the bits that aren't so happy and that's a challenging part of your journey, you're like, look what I got through. Look where I am today.
Assignments seem easy for you, and you're like, well,
yeah, exactly. No, some really great advice, especially when you said, the tablet box on the side, and people can at least see if you've taken it. Like, that's one of the biggest things, is young people missing the medication, not on purpose either, just by accident. And it's about getting that routine of how to remember to take it, or who can tell you, who can remind you. Like, a lot of young people these days either set alarms, or there's apparently apps nowadays that you can input when you take medication, and it should alert you.
There's this like phone, I haven't got one, but I did think it was cool. Like, there's this phone pad where you can put your tablet boxes. So I think it's your phone, and then your tablet boxes on one other thing, and then your phone goes off. When you turn it off, it will remind you to take your medication, but it won't go off until it's felt that you've lifted the phone and you've logged in what you've taken. In my childhood, I definitely never understood why people forgot tablets. I've always been like really diligent. And then as you get older, like life gets really busy, and it's like, like I've had days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't take my night tablets like 3 nights last night because I fell asleep. And it's not because I'm doing it on purpose. I'm just so exhausted that I come
so
home,
tired.
gone to bed at like 7 suddenly, and I haven't woken up the next day. I completely missed my tablets. And then you're like, oh no, what do I take now? And it's like,
and that's where it's handy when you've got such good contacts with either, like you say, a new hospital, because you've had the option to text that person or just ask small advice. It's like, actually, I've accidentally done this, what would you advise? And they're really good with that as well, aren't they? And they'll just try and encourage you to remember.
My best one was when I actually tried to be really organized, and I took my medication before I went out for the night. Obviously didn't drink, because I don't drink with my transplant, but I came home and then I took them again. I was like, and I literally had taken double my nighttime medication, and I called the nurse on call at about about 1 a.m. and explained what I did, and they were so relaxed, and the person who did this might listen and laugh herself, she'll remember it, but she was like, just don't take any more. She was like, that was the first thing she said, as if like I was just there, taking many spots or whatever. And then she was like, you're definitely okay, aren't you? There's obviously no horrible reason why you've taken it, because they have to be serious about that.
Exactly.
Emotionally dangerous with that reason, and then calling for help, because people do that, and that's a big thing that needs to be helped out, and understandably so. But I was like, no, I'm just too efficient and then too forgetful. And then I had my blood test in the morning. She was like, right, now you could have missed this dose. We'll start again tomorrow. And it's so important to be on your medication, because it can just happen for the best intended reasons. Like, I really did just think that like I would take them before I left, so I know I've taken them if I fall asleep later on. And then I obviously didn't fall asleep, and I was too efficient.
So you've had it from both avenues, where you've accidentally missed some, and then you've actually took a second dose even though you weren't meant to. So like you say, no human is perfect. That is a lesson learned, and it's like, actually, how can I refrain from that accident happening again? And that's what your team is there for, and obviously you've reached out to them. Another lesson of managing your own health and your own condition. So I know you recently have had what is considered like one of probably the biggest procedure that a young person would get a bit nervous by, and that was that you've recently had a biopsy in adult services, which is different to children's. I'll let you explain the difference that you noticed between having a biopsy in adult services and then having one prior in the children. So obviously people can be aware of that.
Yeah, so as a child, you tend to be put under general anaesthetic, and as an adult, you're put under local anaesthetic. And so obviously general anaesthetics for sedation, you're completely knocked out, wake up in recovery later, and the local anaesthetic is more, just in the local area that's being operated on, or in this case, having a bit of liver removed. And yeah, it's completely different. I think maybe because of your age, a lot of it, the emotion-based side of it. I personally found the adults one a lot more reassuring. I said it's quite a healing process for me. It sounds a bit random until you probably hear the full story of why I felt that was like a really healing, reassuring process going forward if I ever have to have a biopsy again. I think a lot of having a biopsy, there's so much fear around it. My biggest fear was the going to sleep and not waking back up feeling. I think it's quite a scary idea for a child. Like, it's scary for anybody. Like the idea of being put to sleep and then you haven't chosen to fall asleep, you haven't been unconscious feeling, you didn't just fall asleep in the back of the car or something. It was like you're getting forced to be put to sleep, and it's a weird feeling because obviously it's medical, the setting's medical, you're often your parents are there with you suddenly, like just sitting around you with loads of medical professionals, needles, maybe a mask, to knock you out with sedation or mask. I think that's how they do it. Most people, sometimes they do the needle, don't they? You always have to have the needle anyway, but I think I typically had the mask first, which kind of knocks you out or makes you less aware, and then they put in what I always remember it as like a milky medicine, because it kind of warms you up a little bit, doesn't it, and sends you to sleep. Maybe it's because I'm older, I have more awareness of what's going on, but I found that knowing what was happening took away the mystery, and that was really, really helpful. I didn't have to worry about what they do.
It's one of the biggest challenges that people weigh up, and that's, I think, as a child from the children's who's had biopsies in that setting, you get used to that way of doing things, and then when you get told and you move to adult services and they're like, oh no, we don't put you to sleep when you have a biopsy here, you're awake, but we obviously give you the anesthetic to numb you. That's when people get a bit fretty as well, because it's like, hold on, I'm not used to that. That's a big change. Will I feel it? All those questions run through their minds, don't they? And I don't know, did it run through your mind?
Initially I was really frightened about having an adult biopsy. It's so bizarre. Like, I thought, I was worried that I was going to feel it, firstly, the pain. There wasn't many people who've had this adult biopsy yet that I know, but everyone that had it pretty much said, like, it's so awful, don't let them do it to you, make sure you're knocked out. And that was really, really unhelpful. And that wasn't my experience. I'm not saying that it's not the case for other people, it's different for everyone, but I wanted someone to hear like a positive story, that it didn't feel that way for me. Yeah, I was really scared. Like, I felt that I was going to feel it all. I would see things I didn't want to see. It was frightening. Like, I still had all the fears about recovery and stuff, and obviously what the results are, which ultimately what the biopsy is about. Yeah, and it wasn't like that. You could,
so everything you probably thought and envisioned, would you have said it was the opposite?
Yeah, no, I would. I think it's quite simple as that. Yeah, no, it wasn't. I didn't find it particularly painful. I think obviously you can't negate the fact that you still have to have a cannula, but then you have to have that anyway. And obviously you have a numbing needle initially. I had 3 of those, but I didn't feel the second one because it was numb. And they don't just jab it into you and don't say anything. It's not like that. You're talked to the whole time, and you can ask questions throughout. You're conscious. I felt very empowered by the fact that I knew what was going on, and everybody was like, the 2 people that were there, the nurse who supports you and the doctor who's like doing the ultrasound and then taking the sample, they were so like informative, and they were telling me what was happening. I didn't have to look, so you don't have to see anything. I mean, initially you only see a scan anyway, so there's no different to any scan that most people get with the liver condition, especially prior to having a biopsy. I think probably like 90% of people would get, and that was the same. It was the same room and everything.
In your experience then, now you've actually gone through the whole process and you reflect back and you're like, actually, everything I was thinking was a bit overwhelming. It was completely the opposite to what I would have thought. If I had been told by a young person in a positive sense. So what would I have wanted to hear? And really, you could do that now. So for those that are listening and interested in what a biopsy in adult services looks like and what that whole process is like, do you want to just give an overview from start to finish very briefly, like what each stage was like or what it entailed?
Yeah, so I arrived at the ward. I went onto a different ward, which is, I don't know if that's always the case. I was on hematology ward, actually, so blood, I believe that was. So I was with cancer patients and organ biopsies that day. This was one other person in there who was having a kidney biopsy. I arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning. I already had my pre-bloods. I think most people would have that in their routine appointment anyway, but because I live in Wales, I had to just pop down just before the weekend for my blood tests. And so they checked those through. Mine were fine. They particularly wanted to focus on my blood clotting level, which is normal anyway for any procedure, but particularly like to look at mine. And so they were fine. They got me to change into a gown like you would. You leave all your, belongings there and they pop a cannula in. That's obviously as normal as you would. They went through all my details and my results, put the bands on me, any allergies, like anything, the normal process that you would when you get admitted to a hospital for any treatment. And my biopsy was scheduled at 9:45 and they actually took me down for 9:30, which is like probably the first time I've gone down earlier than my initial appointment. So it's like, wow, okay. And they were putting in my cannula as people arrived to take me to my biopsy. So it was really quick. But, I'd ask questions to the nurse. She was a general ward nurse, so she didn't know exactly what was happening because it was a bit of an overfill to that ward that day for the biopsies. But she directed me to who to ask before I'd go in. So it wasn't like I was completely blind or not going to get any responses or something. Then I went down to the initial kind of it's like the waiting bay prior to having any surgery. I don't know what they call that area. And somebody did on my blood pressure and heart rate, which they had done twice before I went down. I forgot to mention that, just like general monitoring for over half an hour. Then he asked me any questions. He told me about the procedure. So that was like the initial opportunity to ask any questions. He explained to me quite a few people had asked for my consent prior to having this. Even though I was already down there, they asked you so many times to make sure that you are generally okay with the procedure. And you're asked by different staff, normally alone with different people. So I think, it's to double check that you really have asked all your questions. You're not embarrassed by asking a male or a female or something. So yeah, it's had that. And then the doctor came over and asked me to went through all the risks and benefits, which pretty much is you might have a bit of bruising, obviously. You might have a little bit of a bleed because, and when I say a little bit, I don't mean like a major bleed. I mean like you might bleed on the plaster afterwards, which is completely normal. If someone if you cut yourself, that's going to happen. Obviously, then in any surgery, you have to consider like any very, very rare situations where you have to you have a blood transfusion and stuff like that. But I think they have to say everything for a reason. You have to not think that's going to happen to you. It is incredibly rare. And I've had, it's my 5th biopsy now, and I haven't had that. So, touch wood, that's standard. I've never heard of anyone have that problem.
No, it's just procedure, isn't it? Protocol, like you said, they have to cover everything, don't they?
Don't get alarmed by that side. So then they get you to send a consent form. Soon you're taken into what is actually just an ultrasound room. It genuinely is exactly the same. It's not a theatre or anything. You have a designated nurse who's with you, who's basically there to keep you comfortable, ask you any questions. Go through this consent form again, time at least. Yeah, it was really helpful. And so the first thing they do obviously is scan your liver, and they kind of just do general checks and measurements like they would any ultrasound, check you're okay and happy to go ahead with the procedure. Then they put the kind of marker pen arrows where they're gonna jab you to. And then I had 3 numbing needles. So I think most people have 2, but I had 3 to do with my height, weight, blood pressure. I don't know. But it's just, I guess it's different for every person how big or small you are, to make sure you're essentially numbed enough and you're not going to feel anything. I felt the first one and I felt the pressure of the second one, but I didn't feel any pain. So obviously the first one's like a sharp scratch. It really is the same as having any normal blood test. And then you're completely numb. So after that, you don't feel anything. I didn't even feel when they went to put what I call an EpiPen. I'm guessing it's a large, I think it was a large needle from what I've seen before, but I didn't look at that. And I didn't even know it was there. It wasn't because I didn't want to look. I just didn't notice. Too busy talking. And they pop the needle in, and there's like almost like an EpiPen button at the top of the needle, and it clicks and it will take the sample out. And normally you just need 1 or 2. It might have 2 because they want to check each side of the lobe of your liver, I'm guessing. I presume that's why they take 2. But it's also because they want to take the right amount of liver for a sample. You don't want to be coming back for all of this. So make sure they've got enough. I was lucky I got it on my first. So I was very lucky to just get it the first time. But having said that, I don't think I would have been concerned having another one anyway, because I didn't feel the first one. So it wasn't like I was going to feel it. And I actually thought I was going to have 2 because somebody said to me you could have up to 3. So I was thinking probably 2 then, maybe 3, but it was only 1. So I was really lucky. So you wait for a little while and they check that sample just to make sure it's enough. I think it takes a couple of minutes. Like they just want to make sure that everything's that they need. It is a tiny sliver. When I say sample, it's not like they chop a whole part of your liver off. It's a really small sliver. Doctor explained to me as like a small eraser size. So like, on the tip of a pencil, it's that little bit of eraser that they use. It's about that small sample. So it's, it's a fair bit for a sample, but not anything substantial. And then after that, they just popped the, the dressing on me and took me to the waiting area again. They did my heart rate and blood pressure. I think I was there for about half an hour. And then after an hour, you're allowed to eat. And after 4 hours, you're allowed to move. And when they say 4-hour bed rest, they mean it. Like you can't go to the bathroom, can't do anything. You're not allowed to sit up. You are laying like slightly raised enough that you can eat after an hour, but nothing. So I would definitely recommend taking your phone and some music, because 4 hours is a long wait when you're laying there. And then after that, you can go home if all's well. I had low blood pressure and low heart rate, but like I said, it's quite specific to me. I do normally have that problem, so it's not that didn't cause me an issue at all. I was laying down anyway, so it wasn't like I didn't feel faint laying down, so I didn't really notice. And that improved after an hour. I was back to a normal heart rate. But yeah, I have that anyway. With even when I get a general bug or ear infection, I tend to get a little bit more tired quicker. So
it's really a positive that you said like you couldn't feel anything, because that's one of the biggest fears, I think, is people getting overwhelmed by the sense that they're awake and they don't want to feel it. So
they ask you if you can feel it, and if you can feel it, you need to tell them, because that's not okay. You it wasn't part of the deal. You're kind of told that you're not going to feel it.
Yeah.
So, and they can give you more local anesthetic, to arrange. It's not like they'll go, oh, tough luck, we're going to do it anyway. It's not like they will. They don't want you being in pain. And
I mean, prior to yours, before they actually took the sample, did they touch your the area and say, can you feel that? And you were saying no.
Yeah, they did. They did all of that. And I actually said I couldn't feel it, but he did give me a bit extra local anesthetic, because they want to make sure that's the case afterwards as well.
And that you're comfortable, and
exactly.
A positive experience. They don't want you to be stressed out, and they want you to just actually be comfortable. And I know that's something you did mention, that you can take music in.
I was actually advised by my doctor to definitely take music for the after part, the sitting down and waiting. But I asked him, could I take that in? And he, to the kind of like a scanning room, because it's all done in the same room, everything. And he was like, yeah, because it's just where you get a scan. Like, it's not like there's not these crazy machines or anything. You are literally just laying there, with the arm slightly above, to like touching the back of your neck. So like almost, I don't know how to explain it, but like you're sleeping on your head almost, your hand on your head, just to reach that area. And you can have music on in the background. Like you can do whatever you want. Like it's very, they're quite happy for you to be in your own little bubble.
I mean, now you've had that experience, and obviously to start with, you were probably feeling like a bit nervous about it all. But now you've done your first one, if you ever have to have another biopsy again in the future, do you think that'll be an easy, okay, like I'm not too worried about it now because I know what to expect?
I honestly would have not even think about it. I know that sounds a bit crazy. I would kind of think about like having a blood test. That sounds like a blood test and a scan maybe, but it really doesn't. And maybe sitting around, you have to book the day off work, I guess, but it really does seem very much like, in my experience, obviously I hope that if I ever have one in the future, it's exactly the same. You can never guarantee that with anything you go through. There might be, I had to have an extra cannula because my first one didn't work, for example. You can't always, that's just individual. But Yeah, it was so easy. It was like
Yeah.
recovering afterwards. They obviously put a cane in case they needed to give me anything or any medication, pain relief. I had no pain relief, but I would have no pain relief while I was in the hospital. I had 2 paracetamols in the evening because I was worried that I would get pain because I was starting to feel a bit like, a bit headachy and stuff. But nothing happened.
Yeah.
I was really lucky, and the plaster itself came off after 48 hours. There wasn't much I could do about it. I don't know if you're meant
Yeah.
to keep it on for a long time, but I couldn't because it's coming off.
And what
And
was your recovery like after leaving the hospital?
so straightforward. I mean, I don't know if I should be saying this, but after 48 hours, I went for a walk. It was like, I don't know if you're meant to do that, but the first 24 hours, I think they say be careful, 48 hours, take it easy. And then I think it's a week you're not meant to like lift heavy stuff or, do anything strenuous. I walked to Topsham from my house, which, is about 3 miles with the dog. So my mum obviously didn't go by myself, but my mum, and just kind of stopped if I needed to, but nothing much. And I travelled back to Wales 2 days afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's normal. That's not me being.
So did you have any discomfort, pain or anything like that? No?
I stopped the dog from jumping on me, of course, but he's a very sensitive dog when he's quite sensible. So he
Yeah.
likes puzzles, and I just recommend making sure you have the next 2 days off anyway, just in case. It can be tiring.
Yeah, because people's, like you say, people's pain thresholds are different as well, aren't they? So you don't know how it would impact other people, but in your case, looking at it now, you're like, actually, it was completely fine. I felt rested.
Maybe the only thing I did feel was it was a little bit it's like eating a full meal in that particular area. I think that's probably because you've had a few needles there. It just feels a little bit swollen, but padded almost. Like it just felt like I'd eaten a big meal on the right side. It's just a bit bizarre.
Yeah.
Area, but it wasn't painful. It was just like weird feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's weird to be told, oh, yeah, you need to take it easy now, and actually you feel fine. So you're having to tell your brain, like, actually, you need to take it easy,
Yeah,
even though you're like, yeah, I'd like to do as normal.
Don't just think because I went for a walk the next day that you're going to be going for a walk the next day. It's not the case, because there's a difference between going on a walk leisurely where you can stop and go home and going to work using a forklift or something. It's like, that's not okay. You're still meant to have those 2 days to a week taking it
to
easy.
rest,
because you don't know what's going on inside. Just because
that's it, isn't it?
Outside doesn't mean you can take liberty of that and do any damage. Be sensitive.
Yeah, and it also helps with, like you say, the fact that that inside's got to heal slightly, because there's a small, like you say, a small little cut that they've made, so it just needs to heal. It's really, really good of you to share, because obviously you couldn't have got a more positive experience, I don't think, from your example. And like you say, the risk of being put to sleep is minimized because you're not as an adult, and you can continue your day. Yes, you have to take some time out, obviously sit in the hospital and make sure you're okay before you leave, but it's so much easier to leave if you've taken well to it. And like you say, you were in that day and out. So
same day, 8 till I left at 3 o'clock in the end, so 8 till 3. All of it had been done in that time, including waiting times.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'd imagine that's a lot shorter than the children's. Because
I think I normally got out about like late dinner time if I was lucky, and then a lot of the time you have to stay in overnight if you took longer to wake up. I think there was a couple of occasions where I reacted particularly well to general anaesthetic and didn't come out for a lot longer, and so you have a longer waiting time, so staying in overnight. And of course, if you haven't eaten, drank, and you're walking and gone to the bathroom, they're all things, if you haven't done, they will keep you longer because they need to make sure that all of that are a bit more scarier. So
no. Same situation while you're sharing your story. I hope this helps others that are feeling a bit apprehensive towards being told that they need a biopsy in adult services, because I was discussing before we actually recorded that there are other young people that have said adult services in terms of the biopsy procedure has been quite positive, and some have now said they actually prefer it. So
it's a shame that kids move around so much if they were doing something like that, or that kids would probably get more impacted than an adult seeing anything that was like quite surgical, depending on what you're getting done. Of course, biopsy related can be a bit more surgical, I guess, if they're taking a few samples, but yeah, for me, it was like a really healing situation, because I know going forward, I don't have to be put to sleep under general anaesthetic every time. Like, that probably was like the biggest fear for me, because when you're under general anaesthetic, you don't really think so much about what they're actually doing as long as you wake up. I know that sounds really like dark and finalised, but I think most people feel like that when you're having a surgery. You're like, oh, I hope I'm okay on the other end. Because the
Well,
actual
that's the biggest trust you have to have, isn't it, with your hospital? And like you were saying earlier, you build such a bond with your hospital because you've gone through things like that, where you've put your life in the hands of others while you're not even conscious to the world.
Yeah, you have no idea what you're doing. Whereas this
Yeah.
way, I knew exactly what they were doing to me, and I could self-assess like whether I was feeling pain or whether I
Yeah.
felt okay.
And if
And
ever anything popped up, you were awake to say,
yeah,
actually, I am going through a phase at the moment that I'm not coping. And they would have talked you through it, and they'd have, done what they needed to do to make sure you were settled.
they were
So,
so relaxed about it. I feel like they, if I'd actually said to them right at that minute, no, I don't want to do it, of course that would have been a nightmare, because I wouldn't have had the results and people would have been grateful for that. But it'd only been a nightmare for that temporary moment. I don't think they would have really minded. They would have understood that this isn't the right time for you, because you are the patient. But it was just very rewarding. Like, the fact that you are awake and you know your own body is empowering anyway, because you know that you're being listened to and you're in charge in some ways of your own health. Like, it's
and was
not
somebody speaking to you during the procedure?
I had a female nurse. She was kind of like just beside me, asking me if I could feel anything. I mean, to be honest, she asked me about loads of random things about my life, and that was really helpful because I wasn't at all focused on what was happening. So it was like talking to a friend,
Oh, that's good, isn't it? And that's ideally what you want. So you're not just lying there, like you say, in silence, thinking, what are they doing? When you've got medical team working together and making you feel more comfortable than ever, then
She waited with me afterwards for a bit as well, because my blood pressure was slightly low. She waited with me until another nurse had come and checked that was coming up again. And I'd met her before, like slightly before she took me down as well. So yeah, and it was really helpful. Very good. The one other benefit that I haven't mentioned at all is that when you're in adults, I don't know if this applies to everybody. I have two hospitals, and I have my local, what was my local where I grew up, and Birmingham, and I managed to get my adult treatment, like my biopsy, done in Exeter, which was so much easier because I didn't have to worry about things that you have to factor in as an adult, such as like where you stay overnight, the travel cost, recovery coming home from that. Because it was my local hospital, it depends on whether you like live in a village, a small town, or if there's somebody that can do that procedure. But I was able to have it done next to, which meant I could stay with my parents, and I wasn't worried about traveling, location, or anything. Whereas it'd been in Birmingham, it can cost about £100 for me to get from Wales, or Exeter actually, to Birmingham, not including finding a hotel and getting back and forth from that place. So it was a massive bonus. I think when I had my 14-year-old biopsy, I had lots of other tests that need to be done anyway, kidney, etc. And I was there for a few days, and I don't know what it costs, but I probably don't want to imagine.
And it's factoring things like you say, parents having to pay for their meals as a child when they're attending with you, and the parking or the travel or the hotel, the magazine that you want to read.
It can be like, it can be sometimes as long like a weekend away's worth of stuff that could have gone towards a weekend away of enjoying yourself. And I know that sounds quite blunt, but as an adult, like now paying bills and stuff, you do think about like, oh gosh, I have to keep this trip,
and it's that transition as well, where you realise how much parents have paid for that regular treatment and care, which they would do,
of course.
But when you independently manage your own care, and like you say, you've got your own money coming in, and you're like, okay, I need to sort this out, then you then get faced with actually how much it can cost, and you're like, oh right, okay. So I mean, finding out that you could have it locally, I bet you were absolutely buzzing. It wasn't costing you a fortune on the train.
No, it was literally just, and I went to see my parents at the same time, so it's great that I got to see them too. And then because I had my bloods on the Friday, I spent the weekend with them, and my biopsy was on the Tuesday to give enough time for the bloods to come back. So I could just spend a nice week with them as well. I think that's one of the biggest things as well that people do suggest as a top tip. That's when you do have procedures at hospitals, and for instance they take your whole day, and if you can try and make something of it,
because you're visiting, in some cases, a different city.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, shall we, if your appointment's in the afternoon and you get there early, you could have some nice lunch, or, you know what I mean, go and see something different.
I was so lucky. I had my transplant on the 11th of the 12th, which is 11th of December, quite a cool number, 98. So mostly my appointments were at Christmas time. So it was every year-ish, you know, at least a yearly checkup. It's like in Christmas, so at Christmas time. So by the time the appointment came through, it was very close to Christmas. So I would go to the Christmas market in Birmingham every year. And so I kind of, it was very good association. I'm presuming my parents did this on purpose, but when I was very young, I used to take my gran as well. And we used to go to the Christmas market, and I used to be able to pick a toy afterwards. And obviously the Disney store was massive. Yeah, I loved it. If I behaved well, my mum and dad would give me a toy.
You'd have a treat after, yeah.
It was like heaven, you know.
Yeah.
And so I kind of associated Birmingham with going to the Christmas market and having fun. And I have to, but the you know, I just have to pop by the hospital on the way. That's how I kind of thought that way. Yeah. And you know, it didn't make it so much of like a struggle. This is dental fortune in my case, but you know, you can do that with lots of things, like, you know, Cadbury World and Queen Elizabeth's are literally one stop apart on the train station. The thing's massive for,
I was gonna say, there's lots of things going on in Birmingham
as well, so that's always a bonus. Pop in to see you guys as well. And if you have like initial worries, and I'm sure, you know, one of you would talk to the person, you know, it's quite, if you are in Birmingham, that's really handy. I know some people are in Leeds and London. So many, but
it's still applicable, isn't it? It's like you say, I think, I mean, you were talking about your experience at Christmas. There's Christmas markets everywhere, isn't there? And I mean, I've actually visited Leeds Hospital, and there was one, and I was like, oh, that's great, because families have something to do when they visit for that appointment, or like you say, that procedure, that daily procedure. So, and it's something different to look forward to.
Birmingham was so amazing culturally, just so many different foods. It's incredible. And there's stuff like, compared to Exeter, like there's so many different cuisines there. I make a point of going to, like, even if it's a different restaurant every time, like I will pre-Google somewhere that I would really like to go for dinner or lunch. And even if I have to like get a really late dinner on the way back from that, at least I've done it. You know, I make sure I arrive early to
try something new.
And also make friends with the local people. Like, ask your friends, are you also at the hospital that day? If you're part of CLDF, so many people go on the same day, because there's normally a designated like Wednesday for Birmingham, I think it is.
And that's it. And now with the chat group, that makes things easier, because there's so many people on that one group that you can say, is anybody else there? And it has been known that young people have met up, because they've managed to, you know, see that, or find out that they are actually at the same point at the same time. So
lives locally to you anyway, like even if they're not at the hospital, they might also just happen to live in London or the outer London. Birmingham.
I mean, that's it. You've met so many young people through CLDF, and everybody lives everywhere. So, you know, if you actually make it known and you're like, I'm coming up on this day and I've got an appointment in Birmingham, the ones that live locally to Birmingham may meet you. So it's just an opportunity. And that's what happens again. I mean, your experience of Transplant Games is bringing everybody together in one space and meeting people face to face, which is a lovely opportunity. And if you can manage that yourself and try and arrange it, that's always like a great opportunity.
Family support as well. You know, if you're going up as a whole family, like later teens, I don't know, but it can be nice to have like the whole family support. If you've met a family from previously being in Birmingham through the games or CLDF, you can meet up with that family if that works for you. You know, having a family support. Like,
or even just message them, even if they can't actually, like, they're not local or they can't meet you. The fact that they know that you're going through that day, they'll always be at the end of a message.
Exactly.
So no, that's really valuable experience that you have shared there. So I mean, just to finish off then, what would be your biggest advice and message to others from your experience and of your recent biopsy procedure?
So emotionally, I would say make sure you've wrote a list of questions on your phone. Always a good thing to do. If you're having like any last minute panics, write them all down, mind map them, maybe put it on a phone list so you have it with you all pretty much all times, I presume. Lots of questions, and don't be afraid to ask them. I think practically I would definitely take something to keep you busy. I took snacks as well, because hospital food can be a bit hit and miss. So I took my own snacks and a nice drink, something to look forward to afterwards. I think everyone has to fast from midnight the night before. So you probably will be very hungry, because I was lucky to get a morning one. But if you're in the afternoon, probably important that you take some nice treats afterwards. Definitely take headphones, because obviously people on the ward don't want to hear your music, but laying there for 4 hours, it's really worth taking. And also maybe line up a few Netflix programs, or if you're more crafty and arty, take some like knitting or drawing, or something keep you occupied. I'm not sure you're going to do that laying down though. You might have to do that before the op. But you'd be very talented.
It's one of them though, isn't it? Like being an adult, sometimes it's very rare you actually get some time to yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
You're like, actually, I've got 4 hours now. I can do something that I actually enjoy hobby-wise.
Tried to take my dissertation. Of course I did. Of course I tried to take. I didn't do it, funnily enough. I think when I balance a laptop laying down, I didn't think about that part.
That's true.
Lay down the whole 4 hours, but I actually put on my phone for 4 hours, and it's amazing how quick it can go.
Obviously, I know you suggested downloading or making sure you've got some kind of TV to watch, but I'd imagine they've got to be pre-downloaded unless you can.
Don't try and rely on the internet. I think there might be rules in some places about that anyway. I don't know, but you might not even get connection. So so it's always better to have maybe an MP3 player, if people even use those still. I don't know if people still do anything like that anymore, but obviously if you've got an iPhone, I know you can download music and have it.
Well, you can download your TV, can't you, prior to watching it as well? So it just stops any frustration, doesn't it? And like you say, sitting there, you can automatically start your film.
Totally agree.
But I mean, you've shared some really good advice there, some real good top tips that people can note down ready for theirs. And it's really been nice to have you back, catching up, especially since you've had such a journey with CLDF. So it's really lovely that you've gone from, like you say, a child to young independent adult. You are now managing your own health, and you're in adult services and paying the bills for it now. Doing more adulting things. It's easy. So we always welcome you back. So anything pops up along the way, it'd be lovely for you to share again. But I think that's hopefully got the message that it is and can be a really positive experience, nothing to get overwhelmed over. And I think it's really helpful that you've talked through the whole process, because that's something that's unknown to some people. So I think that's really helpful. So I'd just like to say that thank you for taking part,
having me. It's lovely
sharing your experience.
Very nice to see you. So.
And we look forward to following up with you again in the future. All right, thank you.
Bye.
For those that are listening in, it's lovely that you've joined us on CLDF Chatter. I am the Young People's Officer, so if you do need any support from listening to this podcast, or there's any concerns that you may have or advice that you might need, please do contact us on Hive, our online Facebook group chat, or you could email ypo@childliverdisease.org, or alternatively you can call us on 0121 212 3839, and we look forward to hearing from you.